You are standing at the edge of a hole in a Spanish cave. The hole drops 13 meters straight down into complete darkness. At the bottom lie the bones of 28 people who died together. They died 430,000 years ago, before our species existed. One skull among them has 2 holes above the left eyebrow. Same object, 2 different angles. Neither of them was an accident. Somebody hit him in the face. Twice. Meaning to end him. This is the oldest murder anyone on Earth has ever found. And the strangest part is not how he died. It is where he ended up. Because bodies do not carry themselves 13 meters underground. So when did humans first kill each other? Seriously, think about it. It sounds like a simple question with a simple date attached to it. It is not. It is 3 questions wearing a single coat. Killing an animal to eat is not the same as killing a neighbor. Killing a neighbor is not the same as organizing 40 men into a raid. And organizing a raid is not the same as an empire with an army. Most documentaries smear these together into one long story about violence. That smear is why people believe 2 completely opposite myths at once. Either our ancestors were gentle until farming ruined everything, or they were monsters. Both stories are wrong, and the evidence is far more interesting than either. Because the bones do not tell a story. They tell several, badly. And one of them ends somewhere nobody expected it to end. It's not one thing. It's never one thing. There are several layers here. We start with killings that happened before there were any humans at all. Then the first weapons, the first murder, and the first organized massacre. Then a fight about numbers that has split anthropology down the middle. And at the end, one detail about that Spanish cave that changes everything. It has nothing to do with how he died. Let's go. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the first killers in our family. They were not human. They were not close. They were not even us. In 2014, researchers pooled 50 years of chimpanzee field observations, 18 chimpanzee communities, 4 bonobo communities. Decades of patient watching. They counted 152 killings by chimpanzees. They counted 1 suspected killing by bonobos across the same 50 years. 92% of the attackers were male, most victims were male too. 2/3 of the killings happened between neighboring groups, not inside them. And the attackers almost always outnumbered the victim, roughly 8 to 1. They wait until the odds are absurd, and then they are not brave at all. This is not fighting. It is arithmetic, and the arithmetic is very old. Some people argued we had caused it by crowding chimps and feeding them. The data said no. Killing rates were unrelated to human disturbance. Coalitionary killing is simply something chimpanzees do when it is cheap and safe, which means lethal group violence is older than our whole genus. We did not invent it. We inherited the equipment and improved the delivery. In 1994, a German coal mine gave up something impossible. Wood does not survive. Wood rots, always, everywhere within a few centuries. But waterlogged mud keeps out the air, and without air, nothing rots. So Hartmut Tima's team pulled 8 wooden spears out of the ground. They were not sharpened sticks. They were engineered, balanced like javelins. The weight sits forward exactly where a modern athlete would want it. They are commonly dated to about 300,000 years old. Let's be honest about that number because it keeps moving. First, it was 400,000. Then 300. Then possibly 200. Dating is an argument, not a fact, and honest scientists say so out loud. But, whichever number wins, the point survives it completely intact. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, somebody could kill from a distance. That changes everything, and not for the reason you probably think. Up close, killing a strong adult is difficult, slow, and extremely dangerous. The other person fights back. They have hands. They have friends. From 20 meters away, none of that matters even slightly. Distance turns a dangerous fight into a cheap, safe decision. And humans have always done more of whatever becomes cheap and safe. So we had the tools long before we have any proof, we use them. The proof, when it finally arrives, comes from a cave full of bones. In northern Spain, in the Atapuerca Hills, there is a cave system. Deep inside it, past narrow crawls, there is a vertical shaft. The Spanish call it the Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. At the bottom, excavators recovered the remains of at least 28 individuals. Not our species, an earlier one on the road toward the Neanderthals. Among the bones is a skull the researchers simply call Cranium 17. It came out of the ground in 52 separate broken fragments. Somebody spent years fitting them back together, like the world's grimmest puzzle. When the face was whole again, 2 round holes sat above the left brow. The team published their analysis in 2015. First, they asked whether he could simply have fallen down the shaft. A fall makes one impact, or many scattered ones, not 2 neat holes. Then they measured the 2 holes against each other, very carefully. Same shape, same size, same object made both of them, twice. But the 2 blows came in along 2 clearly different trajectories, which means the object moved, was raised, and came down again. Rocks do not do that. Falls do not do that. Only intent does that. Either blow alone would probably have been enough to kill him. The second blow was not necessary. The second blow was a message. 430,000 years ago, somebody wanted somebody dead. Not for food, not by accident, face to face with a rock. That is the oldest murder in the human record, and it is not close. Now jump forward to a cave in the mountains of northern Iraq. Inside, archaeologists found several Neanderthals, buried under thousands of years of rubble. One of them is known as Shanidar III, and he has an injury. A puncture in his left 9th rib that he lived with for weeks. In 2009, researchers tested what kind of weapon does that. A heavy spear, thrust by hand, smashes bone and leaves a mess. A light projectile, thrown from distance, leaves a small, tidy groove. Shanidar III has the tidy groove, and that is a problem. Neanderthals, as far as we can tell, did not use thrown projectiles. They hunted up close with heavy spears, and their bones show it. Somebody else in that landscape, however, did have thrown weapons. Us, modern humans, moving into the same valleys at the same time. Now, be careful, because this is where documentaries always run too far. A groove in a rib is not a signed confession from a human hunter. It could be a hunting accident. It could be his own group. What we can say is that it is consistent with a thrown weapon. And consistent with is the most honest phrase in all of archaeology. So far, every case is one person killed by one other person. That is murder. It is horrible, and it is not the same as war. War needs planning, group loyalty, and somebody who benefits from the outcome. The oldest clear evidence of that comes from a place called Jebel Sahaba, a cemetery above the Nile, in Sudan, around 13,000 years old. 61 people were buried there, in a proper, organized cemetery. It was excavated in the 1960s and read as a single battle. One terrible day, everyone said. One massacre, frozen in the sand. In 2021, a team looked again with microscopes. Not just eyes. They found over 100 injuries nobody had ever documented before. 41 of the 61 skeletons carried at least one wound. About 25 of them showed clear marks left by stone projectile points. Here's the thing nobody tells you, and it is the whole point. Many of those people carried old wounds that had already healed over. Healed wounds mean they were attacked, survived, and were attacked again. So this was not one battle, it was a lifetime of raids. Ambush, retreat, recover, repeat, across generations in the same river valley. And crucially, nobody there farmed anything. These were hunters and fishers, which quietly destroys the comfortable idea that farming invented organized violence. 2,000 kilometers south on the shore of Lake Turkana, in Kenya. About 10,000 years ago, 27 people died in one place. Nobody buried them. They were left where they fell, in the mud. In 2016, a Cambridge team published what they found in those bones. 12 skeletons were complete enough to read. 10 showed lethal trauma. One skull still had a piece of black obsidian buried inside it. Obsidian is not local there. Somebody carried that blade a long way. One woman was found with her wrists crossed, as if she had been bound. The team said this was intergroup violence among hunter-gatherers before farming existed. It was reported everywhere. Now let's be honest about the argument that followed. Other researchers looked at the same bones and were not convinced. Bones crack in the ground. Mud presses. Sediment breaks skulls slowly over millennia. They argued some fractures were the ground, not a weapon, and the burials differed in age. The original team disagreed, in print, at length. The dispute is unresolved. Anyone who tells you Nadaruk is settled has not read the follow-up papers. For a case that nobody disputes, go to Germany, 7,000 years ago. A farming village, a pit, and 34 people thrown into it together. 16 of them were children, 9 were men, 7 were women. Every skull had been struck, most of them by farming adzes. The tool they used to work the soil was the tool they used on neighbors. Nobody was buried with care. They were dumped, and the village moved on. That is what organized group killing looks like when it finally arrives. Which brings us to the number everybody quotes and almost nobody checks. You have heard that 15% of prehistoric people died violently. It appears in best-selling books, in graphs, in 100 confident lectures. It comes from averaging about 21 archaeological and ethnographic cases together. Then other anthropologists went back and reread the same 21 cases. Several cases were single deaths, counted as if they were whole populations. Some sites were chosen precisely because they were unusually violent places. And in at least 2 groups, the killers were 19th century ranchers, not neighbors. Colonial violence dropped into a chart about the Stone Age. One anthropologist called the 15% figure not merely false, but absurd, which does not mean our ancestors were gentle. It means we do not know. Some forager societies show almost no killings across decades of careful observation. Others show a great many. The variation between them is enormous, which is exactly what you would expect from human beings, honestly. We are not a violent species or a peaceful one. We are a situational one. Give people crowding, scarcity, and a clear line between us and them. Then wait. That is all it has ever taken in any century. Now let's be honest about what all this evidence can and cannot do. Every case we have looked at is a survivor of an accident of preservation. Wet mud, deep caves, dry sand, cold ice. Almost everyone who ever lived left absolutely nothing behind at all. Soft tissue rots, skin, blood, fear, motive, and every single word spoken. We can prove a skull was struck. We cannot prove why. Was it a feud, a raid, an execution, a jealous rage, a punishment? The bone will never say. It only says that it happened once. So when somebody tells you exactly why prehistoric people killed, be suspicious. The confident version is always a story. The honest version has holes. But there is one detail in that Spanish pit that has no hole in it. And it is the reason I wanted to make this whole video. There is one last thing I saved for the end, and it is the wildest part. Go back to the shaft. 28 people, 13 meters underground in the dark. Ask the boring question. How did 28 bodies get down there? Not by falling. The shaft sits deep inside, past crawls in total darkness. Not by predators. Carnivores leave tooth marks and drag bones outward, not inward. Not by water. Flowing water sorts bones by size, and these were not sorted, which leaves exactly one explanation, and researchers have argued it for years. Somebody carried them there, deliberately, through the dark, again and again. This is the oldest evidence we have of anybody deliberately handling their dead. Not a grave with flowers, not a ceremony we would recognize as one, just a group deciding over and over that the dead go somewhere specific. And here is the part that has never stopped bothering me. Cranium 17, the murder victim, is down there with all the others. He was not thrown away. He was not left where he fell. Somebody killed him and then somebody carried him into the deepest dark. The same species, possibly the same camp, possibly the same hands. The oldest murder we have ever found is also the oldest funeral. We invented killing each other and caring for the dead in the same place. Careful, though. Nobody claims the killer mourned. That is not the finding. The finding is that his group had a habit, and they kept it, even for him, even for the one somebody had chosen to destroy. So stand at the edge of that hole again and look down. 430,000 years is an unimaginable amount of time. long enough for the species that dug this pit to disappear completely. And yet you already understand everything that happened down there. Somebody was angry, somebody swung twice, somebody else could not leave him there. That is the oldest thing about us, and it is both halves at once. The hand that swings and the hands that carry are the same hands. Nothing since then has changed that. Not one single thing. We are still swinging, we are still carrying, usually the same week. 400,000 years, and we still cannot decide which one we are. More true, strange history about ancient humans is waiting right here.